Now questions from a different pool, a bit more domestic, in-house. Discussion about Polish diversity, xenophobia, tolerance or racism. Now we don't have a break. We've got a coffee break after this debate. As you probably know, the numbers about Polish xenophobia and tolerance are really alarming. According to watchdogs, NGOs, the Polish Ombudsman as well. The government, for a change, says there's no problem with that. Not at all. It's just a sort of leftish propaganda. Well, I would like to disturb you while you're leaving. Could you please at least try to keep a little bit quiet, okay? Because we're going on with the discussion now with no break. Great. As you know, because we've got instances and cases almost every day on the Polish media, prosecutors in Poland are more than tolerant about the incidents of xenophobia. And accordingly, and in consequence, the offenders feel at large. They actually feel encouraged to behave in such a way. After all, and you might have heard about it, the swastika was actually described by one of the prosecutors as a symbol of happiness. Have you heard about it? In Białystok, that was the case. And by the way, all the statistics and the available data actually suggest that it is your generation, that it's actually you, not your parents, not even grandparents, that are the most xenophobic of all the social strata in Poland, which actually was quite surprising to me. So maybe hard questions on that as well later on. So we will discuss this with Dr. Adam Bodnar, Polish Ombudsman. Please welcome him. Now we need more. Yeah, that's fine. Dr. Karolina Wigura, sociologist, Kultura, Liberalna. Dr. Rafał Pankowski, all the way from Cambodia this morning to Cambridge. Sociologist, political scientist and editor of Nigdy Więcej magazine, and Wojciech Kaczmarczyk, director of the Department of Civil Society at the Prime Minister's office in Poland. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I decided there's no sense in dividing this panel, this discussion into first whatever we say and then Q&A. Just at any moment you would like to ask questions or say anything that you consider relevant, please raise your hands and we'll just go on with that kind of debate. Just for a start, if I could ask each of you for a sort of 2-minute introduction. Do we have a problem? And what kind of problem do we have? We've got a representative of the government and the rest of the organizations. Rafał, you're running away already? All right, okay. Okay, who wants to go first? Karolina goes as the last one, so maybe you. Yeah, mics. Well, that would be quite useful. Could we ask for a few more mics, because we only have one that is mobile and the other one it's on cable. We can't really use it. Yeah, we should have something like 3, shouldn't we?
Yes.
Voila. Hey, you've got one? Yeah, Rafał, you'll be the next one probably. Yeah, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here to Cambridge. And after this debate we had just a couple of minutes ago, I had this impression that you must go to Cambridge in order to listen to the real comprehensive debate on the Polish international policy. So really congratulations to panelists and organizers for making it happen. You know, you rarely observe that kind of debates while being in Poland. Answering your question, my feeling is yes, that we have a problem. We have a problem with xenophobia and some racist attacks. Maybe I would use this notion. We have an institutional problem with the official reaction to things that are happening in Poland. And of course, you know, we can go into numbers and we can analyze statistics, but for me what is quite striking is that basically every couple of days we hear about one or another story of somebody who was just beaten up because of the look of this person, because of the language this person was speaking, because of the origin. A couple of days ago in Rzeszów, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago in Zakopane, and basically every couple of days, weeks, such things happen. I usually try to meet victims of that kind of violence, to hear to their testimony, to inform the police. What is, in my opinion, missing are two things. I would say that when it comes to the reaction of police and the prosecutor, I would say it's not that bad. Because usually when you have when you can identify the perpetrator, the police and the prosecutor are working properly. But you have some problems usually later on with outcome of proceedings, or maybe...
The police says you're actually misusing the data.
Yeah, but I think that was in the context of I would say the debate. But when I look into like specific cases, when I analyze, I see some I would say consequence in action here. But the problem is that there is no reaction on part of politicians. Okay, so, but I think it's extremely important here, especially when we are in the UK. When there was a violence towards Polish people in the UK, there was immediate reaction of the UK politicians with respect to this. When I see some violence towards different people in Poland, there is no sufficient reaction to politicians. It is more about saying it is just an individual act, it is just a hooliganism, we shouldn't make some, and we are exaggerating with some.
And that's perhaps the time for you to answer that before we go on in 2-minute expose of yours, Mr. Wojciech Kaczmarczyk.
Okay, thank you very much for this invitation for your Congress to Cambridge. Do we have a problem with xenophobia and racism and the crimes? Well, if we look at the data, in 2015 an increase in the number of new cases concerning the xenophobia and racism crimes, the increase was about 10% comparing to the 2014, and the same kind of increase was in the first half of 2016 comparing 2015. In the previous years, this increase was much higher. Do we have the problem? Yes, we have. We have the problem, and we will have the problem if the only one case of this kind of crime exists or occurs within a country. But I think when we look at the past, specifically from the beginning of 2000 or 2005, when some kind of symbolic gestures from the President Lech Kaczynski were initiated, where the certain activities towards education within the police office and the prosecutor office were carried. I think the government and the agencies, the police and the prosecutor office, does a lot of things concerning education of the members of staff in both offices in order to be more familiar with the specificity of this kind of crime and proper reaction against the crimes.
So basically, what I understand,
yes, I think we have a problem,
but statistics show that it's not on the rise. Do I understand it correctly?
Exactly, and the government does a lot to minimize this problem.
In terms of interpreting statistics, or actually...
No. Actually not, of course not.
Right, of course not. Rafał, Pankowski.
In terms of education, in terms of being more active in this field.
Right, thank you. Rafał Pankowski, nigdy więcej.
Thank you, Grzegorz. It is so nice for me to be here in Cambridge. Somebody just told me that wearing an Oxford tie in Cambridge might be as problematic as wearing a Bodnar scarf in Warsaw. I hope that is not the case. Before I say anything else, let me also explain why you mentioned Cambodia, because I don't think anybody understood what you meant. I literally came from Cambodia this morning, so I didn't have much sleep, so I hang on to coffee.
You have to excuse Rafał, he's jet-lagged.
And my brain doesn't work very well just now, and I apologize in advance if I stumble a little bit. But on a more serious note, this visit to Cambodia was very, very special, and the visit to the killing fields, the Genocide Museum, which is located at the former Khmer Rouge prison. That, of course, reminds us once again what the ideology of hate could lead to. What does totalitarianism mean? And that happened not so long ago. I was born in 1976, so it was actually in my lifetime. And it is just hard to imagine how was that possible after Auschwitz. They killed between 2 and 3 million people out of 8 million who lived in Cambodia in the late 70s. So it was very special. And it just reminded me all those topics we are discussing here, such as xenophobia, hatred, racism, intolerance in general, totalitarianism. It could have grave consequences even after Auschwitz.
But are you speaking in really theoretically, or are you referring to what's happening at the moment when you're raising these concerns?
Well, I think if you understand fascism as the ideology of total cultural homogeneity, then clearly this threat is present.
Right. Are we on the way to fascism?
Well, I think it depends on all of us as citizens, as human beings. But I think the awareness is very important. Right. And it's not just a Polish problem, of course.
Sure. We'll discuss it later. Karolina.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm really delighted to have this chance to speak to you and to discuss the subject of xenophobia with you. Let me address the title first. It seems that xenophobia is one of the terms that are quite full of paradoxes. It seems that every one of us knows the definition once we utter the word xenophobia. But is it really true? Aren't the definitions that we utter actually contradictory? Isn't it that some of us will probably say Poland does have a problem with xenophobia because of anti-Islamic rhetoric, whereas the other ones will say that Poland has a problem with xenophobia because of anti-conservatist rhetoric. So how is it really? What is really the situation that we have in Poland? Let us perhaps depart for a little bit from notions like xenophobia, but also other notions like populism or democracy, and try to understand that exactly these notions keep us in the trenches of the polarized Poland, and do not let us see that actually the mentality of Poles is today very similar, even between the trenches. How to explain that? Alexis de Tocqueville wrote famously that the French Revolution, which started in 1789, actually started a long time before, and what happened after 1789 was actually something like a post-mortem convulsion. So let's take this logic and let's speak a little bit about what happened before 2015 and 2016 in Poland in order to explain where we are actually today. I would change the tools from speaking about xenophobia, about the problems of racism, and I would turn to emotions, of public and political emotions, because they seem to be the key. They seem to be at least a scarlet dye that is a useful tool to explain the situation. And let me just mention, sorry, this will not be a long lecture, although it appears to be. I will just name 3 emotions and then I will come back to them later if you like me to. The first emotion is crucial and it's fear. European Union and European order after 1949 were built on the notion of fear. It was fear of the past. Well, the fear evaporated. It's normal with generations. And it was, the place of this fear was taken by anxiety. Anxiety of unemployment, anxiety of immigrants, etc., etc. The second is surely boredom. We have been complaining about the situation we live today in, but actually the Europeans have not lived in better conditions for decades or even ever before. So perhaps we are looking for stimulation more than we actually are complaining about this, the real situation. The third emotion is, of course, resentment. Relative deprivation, as you might say. So the hell of comparisons between people. And here I believe the discussion starts about showing the groups that might be hated and showing the groups that might be the responsible for what we are currently observing in our society and politics.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask you actually, before we go on, if we were to phrase a question, do you think that xenophobia is a real problem, not a problem in statistics, but a real problem in Poland? How many people will actually say, yes, it is a real problem that we have to face, and that's dangerous? How many hands would be up? Okay, that looks like a majority, but how many people would say that it is a problem, but it's overrated, it's exaggerated, and it's basically not on the rise? Let's don't worry about it. Fewer. Right. Where are we going, ladies and gentlemen? Well, then I won't be pointing at you. Let's just make it a conversation. Are we on the way to nationalism?
I would go on with Minister Kaczmarczyk said and answer your question, where are we going, and what I would dream of. When I look into different social problems, I have a feeling that there is a need to cooperate with my office. So, for example, homelessness issue, I raised the flag with respect to some important issues to be resolved, and quite recent days, I received quite a number of good answers saying that yes, we do some changes. For example, in order to check the health condition of people who are accepted into shelters for homelessness. And here, if we have a social problem, because it is a social problem, which in my opinion is not only about groups like Muslims, people of Arab origin, or national minorities that are subject of this problem, but also people who are, for example, Catholics, who are also becoming more and more problem of hate speech. Yesterday I had a conference with verbal hate speech. Yes, it's if you analyze different fora, you can see that they are becoming also more and more subject of hate speech. That it is a social phenomenon that is important to all different segments of society. I could imagine that we should cooperate with each other in order to resolve this problem. And you can cooperate by raising awareness, by making different educational programs.
Is it not a little bit naive? I'm sorry, pardon my question,
Maybe.
but I mean, what? It seems that hatred among people is on the rise. We basically like to hate other people. We hate foreigners, we hate Muslims, we hate Catholics, ultra-Catholics hate the leftists, and it seems to be sort of getting stronger and stronger.
Okay, but when it is becoming stronger and stronger, then the role of the government is to cooperate in order to resolve the problem and not to downgrade the problem, not to say that it is not such an important problem. And there are basic methods how to do it. And I would just give you an example.
Sure, but before we go on, what happens if they do say that it's not a problem? I mean, you can, Minister, but maybe that's a question for you. If you say that it isn't a problem, where do you see the space for cooperation? I'm sorry to interrupt.
I haven't said
You didn't say this.
It was a problem. It wasn't a problem. It is a problem. Yes.
Except it's not on the rise.
But, well, I think this is the issue, and this is the concern of the proper methods how to deal with xenophobia and racism today. And, well, perhaps this is, in some cases, this is the question to the government, but I think we should also to ask this question: how to react in a proper way to civil society organization, which should play, I think, more important role in education within the country.
So education.
Yes, definitely. But we have good models of education, where the and the bad models of education. In some cases, I had a chance to look at the programs of anti-discrimination lessons, where the anti-discrimination issues against certain minorities also were connected with discrimination of other groups. So, I would encourage the non-governmental organizations, the civil society organization in Poland, to rethink the models of education to bring more tolerance towards everybody.
Sure. I just remember that in terms of education, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the training for policemen, from that curriculum for the training for the policemen, actually the anti-discrimination measures were removed, weren't they? They were?
No, it's not true.
That's what the media reported some 6-7 months ago. Oh, right. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
In fact, one of the activists of the Never Again Association, I don't know whether he's still with Never Again, Jacek Purski, was just conducting training for police. So it is not that true that police is not educating in this field, but for sure, where we have a problem, and maybe I will try to define, because I think we all can agree that when it comes to fighting racism and xenophobia, especially due to religion, due to ethnicity, due to the color of the skin, there is no doubt that we should fight with this problem. The problem is that this issue could be sometimes qualified in the Polish public life as a part of so-called gender ideology. So it is not treated, I would say, separately, but as a part of some bigger picture. And then there is a conflict. So whenever I try to convince that basically you cannot divide this into fragments, into parts, you have to look into treating the other in a complex way, then there is an answer from the, let's say, Ministry of Education: no, we will not do anything special here. Everything you have already in handbooks, everything is in the curriculum. You will not introduce any other additional specific programs. And I think that we must find some solution how to deal with this problem, because right now we are not progressing, and of course we can challenge each other all the time. But for me, the solution is quite simple. We should look into Polish history. We should look into the history of 16th, 17th century. We should look into the history of the middle war, between war period. We should look into what kind of sacrifice Polish people suffered due to discrimination, and maybe from this angle look what is the consequence of having hate speech, hate violence in our society.
Plus, we've always been multicultural as a nation.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Well, just to answer, I do not work for Ministry of Education, but together with Ministry of Education in 2016 we removed we refused the patronage for certain program of anti-discrimination lessons. Why? What was the reason? There was the manual of anti-discrimination lessons, where, for example, in one lesson, ecumenical lesson, the priests from different denominations came into the class, and they were asked by the pupils about, religions, the denominations. And in the beginning of this lesson, the lesson which occurred in reality, the Catholic priest, and it was put into the manual, the Catholic priest stood up and told, well, I was not informed about this kind of lessons is going to happen, and I am quitting. Well, it was the only case, the only one case in this manual when the Catholic priest appears. 50 years after the Second Vatican Council, when in the ecumenical movement, the Catholic Church makes so many positive changes and things, where the Catholic churches in Poland are the places of the prayers for the unity of the Christians, to show the Catholic priest only one way as an arrogant person claiming against the ecumenical lessons. It's not appropriate. So I think when we have in this context, we have the problem of anti-discrimination lessons, where certain groups try to put into the school curricula the contents, which in some cases show make some efforts towards or against the discrimination, but in the same case provide some discrimination against other groups. So I think we should be concerned about that.
Okay, I'd like to discuss the role of the church actually later on. Rafał.
Well, if we ask the question, is there xenophobia in Poland? I think it would be a miracle if there is, because of course it exists in almost every country that we know of. The question is the scale of the problem, and well, there is room for disagreement here, clearly. But the problem is not even new in Poland. It has existed for a long time now.
How are you measuring it? How are you measuring, Rafał? How are you measuring it to be sure that it's on the rise and not a sort of keeps at a stable level?
Well, this magazine, Nigdy Więcej, Never Again, it has been published since the mid-1990s, and the problem then was big enough to have a magazine on the issue of xenophobia and resistance to xenophobia. It was established by the late Marcin Kornak. Both I and Adam had the privilege to work with Marcin over the years. So the problem is not new, but I think it is very clear over the last 2 years or so, it has grown in Poland. How do we measure it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, as a social scientist myself, I am a little bit cynical about numbers and percentages and opinion polls, but all the numbers that
But that's what you're quoting.
Are actually showing a rise in xenophobic attitudes, and especially among young people, unfortunately. But I think a slightly more concrete way of measuring, if you like, the tendencies is the number of attacks and incidents, both violent and verbal abuse against all types of minorities. And according to the data of the Never Again Association, the number of such incidents has grown incredibly over the last 2 years. And there was one moment when the explosion of xenophobia started. That was the summer of 2015.
Election campaign.
Well, the election campaign probably had something to do with that, but I am talking more specifically about the so-called refugee crisis in Europe, which, as we all know, didn't affect Poland in any meaningful, direct way, but it was an excuse, a pretext. Yes, it provided an opportunity for hate speech to explode on a scale that's, I think, in many ways unprecedented in recent Polish history.
Adam Bodnar, you said that it was actually the beginning of it is actually the election campaign. I read one of your...
Yeah, I can agree. I repeated it a couple of times that we had at the same time election campaign, at the same time refugee crisis. And politicians decided to use it as a topic during the campaign. We have anti-migrant marches in Poland when you could listen and read number of anti-Muslim slogans mostly. It seems that it unleashed some devils. And of course those devils existed before. Yeah. And there were number of organizations, activists, groups that were using that kind of a language, but basically this language came more into the mainstream and became much more massive and accepted. and accepted by politicians.
So it's actually a gift from politicians.
Yes, and after elections, it seems to me that they became like a hostage of a topic. So you couldn't get back with this topic in a situation when you were promoting this topic from...
If you're having informal conversations with politicians, do you think they would like to withdraw from that platform from the election campaign, or are they really hostages, as you call them?
I would say that I don't have that many informal conversations with those politicians.
Well, I wonder why.
I would basically like to say two things. The first thing, we have recently written a report, and by we I mean Observatory of Public Debate of Kultura Liberalna. It was actually written for you, but not published yet. And I would like you to know what the results were, basically. Well, basically, we have studied 6 titles from the Polish press, from left to the right, and also 4 portals from left to the right. And we have found the following, which was quite surprising for us. Firstly, there is surely something that we would call a negative package about Muslims. There is surely this negative package. To this negative package belong notions like jihadists, or well, in various meanings like social jihadists, sexual jihadists, conquering Europe, fighting with Europe and European civilization, with Christian civilization. These all notions were present in right-wing periodicals that we were working on. What was also interesting is that this package was very tightly bound with critics of the current European politics. So when the European politics basically talk about tolerance, the right-wing columnists would say, this is a tolerationist ideology. We actually are all dying here. It's a dying civilization that doesn't actually believe in its own roots. So this was basically the result of the right-wing press. Not all of it, of course. We have just been studying 3 titles.
Which ones?
W sieci do rzeczy. W sieci was the most severe, do rzeczy less, and Rzeczpospolita, which is actually quite centrist and tolerant, yes. Now, but we were also studying Newsweek and Polityka and Gazeta Wyborcza, and here our findings were equally interesting. It seems that there is also a negative imaginary on the other side, on the liberal side, let's say.
Peacelam, for example.
You can say about Peacelam. I would rather say, when on the right side, the negative actor is the Muslim and the European leftist that is going to commit suicide, then on the liberal side, the negative actor is the Catholic conservative who tries to close us, every one of us, in a homogeneous society and actually Catholicize us all. They were labels like racists, etc., and fascists, and we believed it was quite impressive that actually those 2 kinds of hatred matched each other. These were 2 imaginaries, and what was for us as liberals the most interesting and astonishing was that people of our own views didn't try to create, for example, a positive imaginary of a Muslim, but they rather attacked the other side. So I think when we talk about xenophobia, we really have to start with the radicalization of public debate in Poland. And this goes precisely on both sides. Now, this was the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing, of course, is that if you have a very strongly polarized political culture, and in Poland it goes back two centuries at least back, it's nothing new, then of course you have various political strategies of gathering public support. If the crowds are so emotional, let's try to find strategies of creating public support. Now, I would just mention two strategies which seemed very visible during the last years in Poland. The first, and what is interesting, not only in Poland, I would say this is quite typical for many other polarized countries, also the UK. The Brexit debate, for example, here was a very good example of the same two strategies. So first strategy would be the educators. So let's educate the society so that everybody is tolerant and everybody is sane, so to say.
But didn't we do it in the past? I mean, we did educate
Can we
on
actually
tolerance.
do it? No, I don't think
we
so.
didn't.
I think that we
sent people on Erasmus program overseas to study in various countries of Europe, for example. Is that not a part of an international education instead of trying to...
The European project of tolerance is a very beautiful one, and I totally agree with that. It is very close to my views. The problem is that it's as with every moral revolution, we can see it in the Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann, that every moral revolution degenerates with time. And so as you see with the Buddenbrooks that every generation is actually worse, perhaps the same happens to Europe. And whilst we were telling the youth about the Holocaust and about how we don't want to have it happening again, so whilst we were uttering the slogan, never again and never again and never again, we forgot what it meant. So this would be the educators. Okay. Somehow the elites that have lost the clue. Now, the new political shift that we are observing not only in Poland but also in other countries, I would say, is directed by politicians I would call the revealers. So they would say, if people have negative emotions, we should just reveal it. Once we reveal it, the steam will just go out and we'll all regain stability. Well, but this is also paternalistic and romanticist at the same time. So we actually have a fight of two romanticisms here.
And you see the proportions equal?
I would say every debate needs its symmetrist. So let me be the symmetrist of this debate.
Okay. And then Rafał.
Yeah, just two sentences on education. Even if we look into Erasmus program and other educational programs that existed or still exist, implemented by some NGOs. It was quite elitist education and restricted to quite a small number of people. How many Erasmus students we have per year from every university? A couple of them, the best ones. It was not massive. If we look from the other perspective, do we even have programs that, let's say, every student, every pupil of the secondary school should go compulsory to Auschwitz or to Gross-Rosen, just in order to feel what does it mean, what hatred may produce. We do not even have that kind of programs. So if we think realistically about educational programs, we should think about masses of the society and not just about some groups of NGOs or some individual cities where such programs are implemented.
Okay, Rafał Pankowski.
Well, I think it is impossible to dispute the observation that hatred, hostility exists on all sides of the political debate in Poland, both sides. Let's say there are two, but it's a simplification, of course. But as an observer and also as a participant of the public debate in Poland, I'm not too sure there is a symmetry. I would take issue with that, but I think it's for everybody to judge for themselves. But I think what is special about the Polish debate is the fact that hate speech is often directed against an imagined enemy. For some decades, we have dealt with so-called anti-Semitism without Jews. That's a term that was coined in the early 70s in the wake of 1968. Today, it is supplemented by something new that you could call Islamophobia without Muslims in Poland. The Muslim community is very tiny, as you know, but the amount, the level and the intensity of the hatred is quite astonishing. And I want to stress that goes very much against what's very important and very valuable about Polish tradition and Polish identity, historically speaking, and you alluded to it already. If you look at Polish history for more than 1,000 years, it's a history of a multicultural nation, multicultural society. Possibly the most diverse, most multicultural in Europe.
Maybe we're deceiving ourselves that some kind of tolerance should follow from the fact that we were multicultural. Maybe we never have.
Well, I'm afraid this diversity is very much a thing of the past, and also the awareness of diversity, respect for diversity is largely a thing of the past. And of course, since World War II, since the Holocaust, since deportations, changes of borders, Poland today is the most monocultural country in Europe. Not just in the EU, I think. It is the most monolithic, culturally monolithic country in the whole of Europe today, which is not normal, which is abnormal if you look at the totality of Polish history. So I think that a return to diversity would be a return to normality for Poland. And well, let's face it, Poland needs diversity. Poland also needs
economically.
Migration, immigration, yes, absolutely. If you look at the pension system, if you look at the labor market, well, etc., etc., there are many good reasons for Poland to accept and to welcome and encourage migrants. Maybe you can ask Mr. Morawiecki about it, I don't know. But, well, what we are seeing is the opposite. What we are seeing is a wave of unprecedented xenophobia and hatred against the migrants that might even consider coming and settling in Poland, and that's of course one of the paradoxes.
Would you like to ask any question or challenge the speakers? Yes, please. By the way, do we have a microphone do we or do we not? Okay, go on. Try to speak louder. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much for your perspective. I'd like to follow something that I think Mrs. Wigura said about emotions and also the different perspective. For instance, the Rzeczy or the Warsaw leaders. So it seems like the one side can accuse the other.
I'm sorry, just to make sure, can you hear him at the back? No. Then we do need a microphone, please, if we can, otherwise it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry about that. Could you just repeat it, please? Yeah.
So I was saying, you know, the one side can accuse the other of being close-minded. The other one would do it, accusing it of being blinded because of political correctness. And also I'm thinking about the different tension, which is rationality versus irrationality, as you were saying about emotions, and also different tension, which is caused by a really powerful film I saw recently, I don't know if everyone's seen it as well, called Silence by Martin Scorsese. And it talks about religion trying to preserve its identity. But on the other hand, of course, religion, so both the Bible saying that love thy neighbor as yourself, Islam saying about the love of your neighbor, or Buddhism talking that your brother is really yourself as well. It also talks about respect to religious other. So I was specifically wondering, what is your perspective on religious other in the light of xenophobia? So specifically in Poland, what can Catholic Church do about helping with that issue?
Thank you very much. That was actually my next point, so thanks for, thanks for that. The role of the church. And we do have pictures before our eyes of the falangas in the Białystok Cathedral. We do have pictures of the Młodzież Wszechpolska, whatever that is in English, I don't even know, with banners saying "Śmierć wrogom ojczyzny," yes? We do have it in the news. What is the role of the church? Yeah.
Thank you very much for this comment. The church is not a monolith. We have been observing various actions and reactions to the refugee crisis, for example, throughout the last 2 years. So, for example, it was the Polish Catholic hierarchs who were ready to invite the refugees to Poland. And this must not be forgotten. And of course, there are also other priests or hierarchs that think the other way. So I was actually surprised to hear a generalization that you created in this discussion. whilst telling us the story about the Catholic priest that was against anti-discrimination lesson, because one cannot generalize from just one example, and it was quite surprising for me. I would like you to perhaps utter a little more about it. But basically, I do believe that Polish Catholic Church could go exactly in the direction which was shown by the hierarchs that were not afraid to invite the people that were in need, and that were arguing that this does actually mean to be a real Christian.
Right, okay. But I still didn't get it. Did you see the symmetry in the church between those who actually say the basically nationalistic church and the other part? Do you see the symmetry between those two voices?
I'm looking now for symmetry in everything that I'm saying.
But quite frankly, I do not see a symmetry. I think just a dominant voice, a xenophobic dominant voice in the Catholic Church. Right? Okay.
I would say that just 1 year ago, I organized a meeting together with Archbishop Gondecki. And it was connected, it was just exactly 1 year ago. It was connected with some meetings on people of Arabic origin that were living in Poznan, and we decided to do something together. And after meeting with people coming from different origins, including medical doctors, businessmen, but mostly of Arabic origin, he made a public statement that we observe in Poland the so-called Sikh nationalism.
Yeah.
So he made a statement. It was a very powerful statement, and it seems to me it was one of the most powerful statements from the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. But I would say that the dominant voice is not of Archbishop Gondecki, is not of Bishop Zadarko, is not of Alfred Wierzbicki from Lublin, and some other important persons in the Catholic Church. The dominant voice is quite different, is quite, I would say, silently accepting what is...
Why is that, do you think? Why is that?
Why is that? I could say I would rather prefer what the Catholic Church, in my opinion, should do. Simply follow what Francis the Pope is saying. Because Francis the Pope, the highest hierarchy, has a view exactly that we should, in my opinion, promote looking into the constitutional values. And for me, the very turning point where I see that maybe there is too much of a relationship between the political life and the life of the Catholic Church was the moment when Catholic Church was insisting on creating so-called humanitarian corridors. So basically it is a measure where you are, I would say, like semi-privately taking some checked families from refugee camps and bringing them to the safe place, let's say in Poland, in other countries. And there was already like an agreement how to do it. And the Minister of Interior said, no, they create a threat to Poland, will not accept anybody, even within those humanitarian corridors which are arranged by the Catholic Church. And I think it shows something because there was no, I would say, strong voice by the Church after this happened, after this refusal.
Would you, anyone here? All right, then. Mr. Sikorski, Radosław Sikorski. Do we need a mic?
I wanted to draw the panel's attention to only one part of where hate speech takes place in Poland, but I believe an important one, because I have to admit to a change of views on this subject. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, 15 years ago about the state of xenophobia, anti-Semitism in Poland, I would have said then that it is exaggerated, that those fighting it are creating it, and that the issue is not as severe, until the internet. And it is simply not possible not to see how much of this horrible hate speech there is when you follow the comments pages of any Polish portal, newspaper, television station at all. It's just a tsunami of nastiness. And this, I believe, has consequences, because views that previously you could only read in a public loo are now made legitimate by the very fact of their popularity. When thousands of people see that others think like me, that means this is legitimate. And where I think we have a problem is that the internet is a wonderful thing, but like every wonderful invention, it eventually needs to be put on a legal basis. And we now see its downside. And I've tried to do it myself. I've sued owners of portals for hateful content, and I've also tried to prosecute. And I'm coming to an end, but this is there will be practical suggestions, okay? The reason the prosecution service is unable to get prosecutions, successful prosecutions for really nasty, I don't mean critical comment, I'm a thick-skinned politician, but when they say to the gas chamber with you, that's the level at which I'm starting to have an issue, okay? And they do not prosecute because under Polish law, they say if a comment comes from your computer and even from within your partition with your password, that is not a guarantee that it's you who wrote it. I asked the British prosecutor how they would do it. They said, if it comes from your computer, it's you unless you persuade us otherwise. So we need a change of prosecute, because stuff that is illegal in the real world should also be illegal on the internet. Come on. I mean, it's not a fourth dimension, number one. Number two, if news outlets make money on so-called hits, the largest Polish newspaper is Fakt. They get 40 million hits per month. So if I attacked someone in a racial manner here, I would be liable. If I do it on Fakt in front of 40 million people, that's immune. We should do something about that. And thirdly, like Zuckerberg, I have reluctantly come to the conclusion that anonymity on the internet does more harm than good. Freedom of expression should, citizens have human rights, and there should be responsibility that goes along with the freedom.
Thank you very much. Would you like to answer that? Yeah, Rafał. Yeah.
Say something quickly. I just wanted to welcome this statement by Pankowski. And let's face it, how often do we hear politicians saying they change their mind on something? That is quite unusual, and that should be appreciated. I just wanted to add one detail on this theme. There is a Council of Europe Convention on fighting cybercrime with a special protocol on fighting racism on the internet that Poland signed in 2002 but didn't ratify until 2015. I think it also showed a lack of awareness or a lack of appreciation of the seriousness of the issue on the official level. Of course, a document like that wouldn't solve the issue. Hate speech, it's good Poland eventually ratified it, but obviously the hate speech online is still very, very serious as a problem. But I think there is also another paradox here. We all thought internet was a wonderful platform for people to communicate above borders, above differences of religion, background, culture, etc. But it turns out it's an unparalleled.
It's actually destroying democracy, some say.
Yes, for spreading hatred and hateful ideologies. But let me just say something quickly about another media outlet in connection with the previous topic. and I'm talking about Radio Maria here. Just recently, I heard on Radio Maria they claimed Polish foreign policy in Ukraine or in the East is directed or dominated by Jewish racial solidarity with Ukrainian oligarchs. Well, if these kind of messages are out there in the public sphere, especially on behalf of a media outlet that's considered to be a voice or the voice of the Catholic Church, then obviously the level of xenophobia increases. And one last point.
Before I go to the last one, who should do anything about it? About, for example, Radio Maria or that hate speech that's coming up there for years, and nobody did anything about it.
No, absolutely. Well, absolutely. I think that the Catholic Church should have done it ages ago. But if we think back to the 90s, then people often said, well, Radio Maria is just a marginal voice within the Polish Catholic Church. Sooner or later, the elderly audience will just disappear because those people will simply die out, and the problem of the xenophobia on Radio Maria will go away. And it just didn't happen. And of course, the audience of Radio Maria reproduced itself. It is still there. And I think it also brings us to this aspect of the older and younger generations. And I think there was an assumption on the part of what we may call the liberal elites, especially in the 90s, about the younger people who were brought up or born in a democratic country, in a democratic society. Automatically, they would be more open-minded, more tolerant, more progressive than their parents or grandparents. But it didn't quite happen. What happened is the opposite. And according to sociological data,
well, how can we handle the internet if we couldn't handle Radio Maria?
Just some thoughts on what Mr. Sikorski said. Just yesterday I had this conference in my office about how to fight hate speech in internet. In fact, the ministry, as regards cooperation, both Ministry of Digitalization and the Ministry of Interior did not appear. They sent, and I don't even expect the presence of, let's say, ministers or undersecretaries of state, but even like regular specialists in those ministries were not interested to talk about this, and they sent letters on the last day before the event. But basically, this event was about promotion and discussion about the European instrument which was created. There is a document adopted by the European Commission and major operators of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other social networks, how to deal with this problem. And basically there are a number of measures how to basically use better notice and take down procedure and how to implement better schemes of fighting against hate speech. And the problem is that this instrument was adopted May last year, but it was not yet promoted efficiently within the member states of the European Union. But coming back to the example of Mr. Sikorski, I would like to say that there are some possibilities in the legal sphere also, not only the activism of prosecutor. The good friend of Mr. Sikorski, Roman Giertych, in his own case, has achieved the Supreme Court judgment saying that in certain situations where the internet portal is not reacting to the notification that there is something wrong with some speech, they may be held responsible. So that you as a victim, you do not have to sue all those individual authors of comments, but you can just sue the owner of the internet portal. And it may bring some good result in terms of creating better filtering mechanisms and better procedures.
Well, we still don't see those better results, do we?
If you talk to operators of, let's say, Onet or Wyborcza PL, they are introducing some measures. It is not like this that they are not doing anything. But the problem is that it is so massive that you cannot effectively react to everything what is happening. And I'm just saying because it is quite important to underline that we are talking about this most radical aspect of hate speech, not just general comments about what you are thinking about the labor market in terms of migration, but such comments like
guest chamber cases.
Right.
Next question, please. Would you? There was a gentleman was first. Yes, Minister.
I have just two comments. One, my full agreement with Minister Sikorski. If you have something to say, say it openly with your name. So I totally agree with your critique, being maybe to a lesser degree victim of similar commentaries. But more important subject, maybe not more, but another important subject that is taken up here, and especially by the moderator, who seems not to be satisfied by too mild picture of Catholic Church as the source of xenophobia. I would like to introduce some real picture. 100,000 of Christians killed every year. Is it a problem, an issue here to debate? How many Islamic priests, so to say, were killed with the help of the voice of Catholic chaplains last year? And how many Catholic priests were killed last year? In Middle East, hundreds, maybe thousands. In Europe, several of them. And do you think it doesn't make an impression in a mostly Catholic Poland? And another element, as Dr. Bodnar said, you have to look into Polish history. Every third Polish Catholic priest was killed during World War II, mostly by Germans, some of them by Ukrainians, few of them by the Soviets. And many of them were killed also after the war, under communist tenets. Mr. Pankowski came back just from Cambodia, where 3 million people were killed not by the Catholic Church, but by the communists, by the leftists, who hate Catholic Church as so many leftists today. And this makes a problem of xenophobia, exactly as Madam Dr. Wigura said. There is not a symmetry, there is a vast dissymmetry of the problems of Catholic people being persecuted and Catholic people as persecutors.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do you see it the same way?
Let me just address perhaps first Mr. Sikorski's comment on the nature of the internet. I believe that the internet has been for the recent years the biggest field of forgetting that we can even imagine, because once you can write everything without revealing your own name, the political correctness is off. So, and once there are very many abusive utterances, the political correctness in reality changes its meaning. So I think this is exactly what has happened. There is some very interesting research in Germany about the forgetting of the Holocaust in the German internet. Very interesting research. But let me please come back to Professor Nowak. I wouldn't like to answer your comment as a whole, because it was very rich, but just let us perhaps see that we truly have two political correctnesses, and the meaning of political correctness truly depends on where we sit in the debate. And I think it's clearly visible in this debate. But I also do believe that as long as we concentrate only on the fact that we think the truth is on our side, there will never be a consensus. Either in this troubled country, Poland, or in other European and non-European countries that are so much polarizing right now. So thus, it would be a few warm words uttered about symmetrism as a kind of distance and readiness to speak to each other.
I think that when we are talking, and maybe I will a little bit repeat what I said before, when we are talking about this phenomenon of hate speech or hate violence, it is sometimes treated as a topic just belonging to, let's say, one group, that one group is exploiting this topic or is talking about this. And what I try to say is that different groups are affected depending on some domestic reality, some social conditions that exist in a given country. The point is whether we should basically segment ourselves into different groups and we should basically argue who is more affected or who is less, or whether we should think that the public discourse should be about the respect for the dignity of the other human being. It should be about thinking, how to achieve a certain result in a discussion, or is it about, denigrating the dignity and the reputation of other people? And I would like to give you an example, which of one case, maybe one issue I tried to explain last days. In fact, I didn't want to talk about it public, but because this person made this situation public, I think that I can tell about it. A couple of months ago, Professor Magdalena Środa, who is quite famous in Poland, wrote on her Facebook profile quite a negative comment concerning celebrations of 10th of each month in front of the Chancellery of the President, and she used quite, I would say, aggressive words towards one person who was participating in the demonstration. So I decided to write a private letter to her saying, if you are really against hate speech, you should not use that kind of a language, because you are making our job more difficult. And quite interestingly, she answered to me, but publicly. She wrote a feuilleton for Gazeta Wyborcza, where she admitted that yes, I exaggerated, I exceeded limits of debate, and I should not do it. It's not the way we should relate with each other. And I have a respect that she was able to admit publicly that, acknowledge that she made this mistake. And I think that we should look for those situations when we are trying to discuss with each other. And that's why I really like your discussion in the previous debate, because you are coming from completely different, I would say, views, but there was a huge respect to each other in terms of competence and how we could discuss with each other.
Yeah. Would you like to make a comment, and then we'll take a question in just a second, Minister.
I would like to refer to what Professor Nowak said. I do believe in long-term education. Look what happened after the famous letter of Polish bishops in the mid-60s to German bishops. And it's not only this letter, but everything would happen afterwards.
Yep.
For example, each paroch in Wrocław has a partnership paroch in Dortmund. So many efforts happened in a Catholic church after this famous letters. Well, this positive atmosphere between the Catholics or Christians in both countries resulted in the 80s. Quite reasonable assistance which Catholic Church and also Evangelical Church provided into the Polish society during the martial law. Well, long-term education, which comes from some kind of symbolic gestures, resulted in 2016 that well, we have so many cooperation, so many friendship between Poland and Germany. Well, we have very good example of Polish-German cooperation of youth, which is the international organization, 3,000 of projects every year. Well, we have to start this kind of long-term thinking also concerning other directions, perhaps to improve our relationships with Jews.
The government, or we that
a government, but also the civil society organizations, which should definitely play a more important role in this process.
That would be reassuring for you to hear here, yes? Right, there was a question there. Richard, please. See?
Thank you. Richard Washington, I'm from Collegium Europejskie w Natolinie and also British Alumni Society, if I can say that, Grzegorz. First of all, I just want to say one thing about Poland, which is a personal thing, because it's where I live. And then I want to make a point and ask a question. First of all, I've lived in Poland for 6.5 years, and I have to tell you that I think Poland is a remarkably gentle country. I've always been treated with incredible respect. And I feel a lot safer on the streets of Warsaw than I ever do on the streets of London, where I was mugged twice and hit by a hammer once, one evening. I have to say I was drunk, but there we go. But my point to you, in 2004, I was very proud of the fact that my country opened its borders and we played good Europeans then. Unfortunately, Brexit is the testimony to our failure and the failure of that process. So we failed. And I want to ask you, if Poland was tested in the same way as the United Kingdom has been, and literally hundreds of thousands of foreigners came to live overnight in Poland, what do you think the reaction of Polish people would be, and would Poland fail as we have here in Britain?
Thank you for that question. Would you like to take that question, please? Yeah, Rafał? We're also running out of time, so we'll take just one more question. Switch it on, it will be helpful, yeah.
Well, the electoral campaign was mentioned already in the very beginning of our conversation. I remember during that time I was in a small town outside of Warsaw, and I was astonished by a poster I saw which said no to an Islamic district in our town.
Where was that?
It was somewhere far from the capital.
Okay.
I'm quite sure there is not a single Muslim living in that town, and the prospect of an Islamic district over there is quite difficult to picture, to imagine. So, like I said before, we are often dealing with hatred that's directed against an imagined enemy. And I think if more migrants do arrive in Poland, I think it would be a real test of the Polish respect for diversity.
Would Ukrainians be a part of the test or not?
Well, there are many Ukrainians in Poland
Exactly.
today,
Correct.
of course. I am sorry to say there has been a growing number of attacks and other incidents against Ukrainians in Poland, which is very unfortunate. But it is telling us that maybe we as a society should think more about the test we are passing every day.
Right. Okay, we have 5 more minutes, so let's take it brief. You are the first, and then we'll go with it. But please keep it short, okay?
Thank you very much. I have a question especially to Dr. Bodnar, but I would also like to hear opinions of others. I would like to tackle this issue of a cooperation of government to respond to those problems of xenophobia we discussed. We had this quite famous speech of Minister Wojciech, the Ministry of Home Affairs, recently about the situation in Ełk, with acts of violence that have been described by Dr. Bodnar as acts of racism. It was criticized by the minister as not a good way of describing those kinds of incidents because it affects the way how Poland is perceived outside the country, and also it gives substance to lefty ideology. Do you think, now you're here, you're talking about xenophobia, do you think you're still, in a way, enslaved in this kind of like act of serving this kind of ideology and spoiling our image as Poland, or maybe there are other ways of tackling this question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, if you are serious in your job, dealing with human rights, you cannot think about, international image of a country. If you are talking about human rights, then you are talking about some specific violations which you observe. The atmosphere in Ełk after the killing of this Polish gentleman was really terrible, and we could all see it in news. Recently there was one of my colleagues there talking to people about problems, and basically I'm preparing the report. But I would say that that's, in my opinion, a problem that this issue is classified as belonging to one part of, let's say, political discourse in Poland. That there is no, in my opinion, sufficient understanding how big problem in a society it is, and in fact how many things we have in common. And for example, referring to what Minister Kaczmarczyk said about the cooperation between youth, I can only agree that the Polish-German cooperation was great. If we could think about, good programs, massive programs involving Polish and Ukrainian youth, Polish and Israeli youth, that would be great. And I can only agree that the civil society could well participate, and by this building bridges, but also like more tolerance and more acceptance to each other. But I would say that my relationship, I would say public relationship with Minister Wojciech is quite special, and from a certain point of time, I'm criticized for different things, whether it is a control border interest poll, whether it is whether these are my speeches about rise of xenophobia in Poland. So somehow I'm used to it, that basically it must be some part of our relationship, but I would really prefer a good cooperation.
It's your car.
Maybe.
Right. And the last, sorry, the last question here, yes. Please pass on the mic.
Thank you. At the very end, I would like to be a bit disruptive and challenge the entire context of the discussion here. And I would like to focus on the very word of xenophobia, which from Greek is the fear of unknown. And I would like to focus on the word fear, because I would like to see the xenophobia only as a form how we express fear and how we express the fact that we are threatened by something. And I see that, for example, the conservatives, or the conservative part of the society, in my opinion, feels threatened by, for example, LGBT movement. The LGBT movement feels threatened, their ideas, their worldview is threatened by the conservatives. I use some generalizations here. So peace feels threatened by the liberals, and vice versa. The rich feel threatened by the poor, which we now call the angry, or in Polish, wkurzeni, to use the euphemism. They fear what they feel they are threatened by. So, for example, the Muslims, or we have an expression of this in the UK. The angry ones feel threatened by the Poles. So I see the xenophobia only as a part of the wider problem of the philosophical approach to life of building one's success, not on my own work, but on the cooperation with others. And I'm finishing. And for example, and the question is to Mr. Kaczmarczyk, for example, as the representative of the government, shouldn't we teach the youth not only that we should treat the black people or others as equal, but shouldn't we teach them about cooperation or, for example, the distribution of wealth as a, putting that in the wider context of building one's own success?
Thank you very much. Would you like to address?
Well, I wouldn't agree with, to some extent, I wouldn't agree with your diagnosis that, the conservative government is against, LGBTI groups. I, as a representative of this government at the beginning of 2016, when I became a plenipotentiary for equal treatment, for the first time invited every single representatives of the organizations, civil society organizations, which deals with problems of equal treatment. It was not the case previously, when the liberal governments invited only the feminists, LGBTI, and so kind of groups, not others, not the representatives of other minorities, of other groups which are marginalized. So, I'm a little bit opposing your diagnosis, and concerning the educational issues, I will only repeat what I said before. So,
thank you very much. The concluding remark by Karolina Wigura.
Very much honored.
Except you have to turn on the computer.
Except I have to be very short. I just wanted to ask two questions, actually, for the end of the debate. Well, thank you very much for your very insightful comment about consensus and about cooperating. I actually was thinking, the subject you have raised, the letter of the Polish bishops to the German bishops, the history is a little bit more complicated, isn't it? Because the reaction to the letter wasn't so positive after all, and also, can we really believe that we might imagine some analogy of a forgiveness between two nations, a nation? Isn't it that forgiveness, as Hannah Arendt says, is always a relation where there is the person who is standing and the one who is kneeling? We wouldn't like to have anybody kneeling in Poland, actually, to regain peace. We would definitely, though, like to cooperate. I believe this is the most important competency that we should actually teach to our children, isn't it? The other question, I'm finishing. The other question is the question about fear and anxiety. Just a question, because I personally don't have an answer to that. But the anxiety towards the refugees seemed to be a very typical example of a Polish discussion. One side said from the very beginning, you should tolerate them and invite them, full stop. And the other said, we just don't want them here because they're evil. So none of the sides actually asked the questions, are we really ready? Should we have them or not? What pluses, what minuses, etc., etc. This is something that we could perhaps have fruitful discussion.
We'll address these questions, yes, at some other occasion. An occasion, I'm afraid we've just run out of time. Adam Bodnar, Karolina Wigura, Rafał Pankowski I Wojciech Kaczmarczyk. Wielkie brawa. Thank you very much. Thank you.